You might think that we don't live in the age of superstition, but I can assure you that we do. You probably remember 20, 30 years ago, someone coming out with The Secret. It was a woman in Australia, I think, who became very, very wealthy on it. The basic idea was that if you want things, you just think about it. There are ways to do it, but the gist of it is that you just think about things. So if you want to become a billionaire, you just think about becoming a billionaire. And hey presto, it will happen. Now, I know some people who practice this kind of thing. It does nothing. And in fact, it's kind of been subsumed under the law of attraction. Well, I have a new angle on it. The law of repulsion, which says that whatever you think about, you will not get. So, if you want to think about becoming a billionaire, the law of repulsion says you will never become one. And it's right 99.999% of the time. Anyway, that's superstition. Now, Spinoza has a very particular angle on the whole thing. So let's have a look at what he says. If men were able to exercise complete control over all their circumstances, well, wouldn't that be nice? You definitely would not want or need superstition if you had complete control over your circumstances. If men were able to exercise complete control over all their circumstances, or if continuous good fortune were always their lot, they would never be prey to superstition. And isn't that true? I mean, you only have to think about it for a minute. If you could get whatever you wanted whenever you wanted, you wouldn't resort to basically silly, irrational practices to try and get what you want. And then he goes on, and by the way, this is from the Theological Political Treatise, right at the very start of it. We see that it is particularly those who greedily covet fortune's favours. Now, I've found this. The people that I've known who've practiced superstitions of various kinds just want stuff. I mean, it's very, very simple. And in fact, the church turned into the Church of Abundance in the UK. Well, part of the church did. The Church of Abundance. You just ask God for stuff and he'll give it to you, which of course never works. But it doesn't stop people doing it because they have to believe in something, some kind of nonsense, rather than get off their backsides and go and do something. Anyway, we see that it is particularly those who greedily covet fortune's favours who are the readiest victims of superstition of every kind. Reason they call blind, because it cannot reveal a sure way to the vanities that they covet. So instead of looking at animals' entrails, which is apparently what they used to do once upon a time, for an easy way to get your whatever it is that you want, why not use reason? Why not try and figure out how you might achieve what you want? Well, that's hard work, isn't it? So anyway, superstition is clearly the way for the lazy, but Spinoza goes on. They think that God, spurning the wise, has written his decrees not in man's mind. And that's really telling, isn't it? There's a whole story there, but I won't go into it right now. But they think that God, spurning the wise, has written his decrees not in man's mind, but in the entrails of beasts, or that by divine inspiration and instigation these decrees are foretold by fools, madmen, or birds. To such madness are men driven by their fears. It is fear, then, that engenders, preserves, and fosters superstition. Please remember that we are not in an age that is free from superstition. Superstitions everywhere, guiding business people, politicians, and your everyday Joe like you and me. We still have our superstitions, and we have the superstitions because life does not give us exactly what we want when we want it. So according to Spinoza, it is fear then that engenders, preserves and fosters superstition. And there is another angle to it. If you read Ernest Becker, he says that superstitions are really an attempt for us to pretend that we have more power than we actually have. It's a way for us to become supernatural, for us to be able to have power over nature that we don't actually have. So that adds really to Spinoza's assertion that superstition comes from fear. And fear, in turn, will make us believe that we have more power than we actually have. And that by looking at the remains of a cup of tea, we can determine what the future is going to do. We are trying to make ourselves into some little gods through superstition. Anyway, that's Spinoza's take on the whole thing. And it's a breath of fresh air. That opening few lines, let me see if I can... If men were able to exercise complete control over all their circumstances, that's all it is. If we had that level of power, we wouldn't need superstition. But because we don't have that level of power, we are fearful, and so we do resort to superstition.